The sit-down strike of 1936 and 37 is a very interesting and very monumental event in American history. It was the time in the very early 30s when the largest corporation, General Motors, they were the largest corporation in the world, and a group of people decided they had enough of the working conditions. The strike was not about wages, it wasn't about vacations or health care, all that negotiated several years later. It was about dignity in the workplace. A workplace that if you worked at General Motors at the time and your family owned a farm, that your boss would tell you, unless you bring me a dozen eggs every week, you no longer work here. A work site where men would bring coffee cans and other buckets to be able to relieve themselves because they weren't allowed bathroom breaks. Work sites where plants were called slaughterhouses because of the raw sheet metal and the heat. It was just a very devastating time, and the people said that they had enough. They knew that during that time frame, there were so many people looking for work in this great country, and that if they walked out, that they would just be merely replaced and their fellow Americans would go through what they were going through. So they decided to sit down.
Can you please talk about the scope of the sit-down strike? How many people were involved? You said something about many countries were represented, people that came here for the American dream. Can you talk about the scope of it?
At that time during our history, where a lot of people were coming to America. They were coming here to search that great American dream that we all have today, and the freedom and to avoid religious persecution. And they went to work for General Motors. And the solidarity and for them to bound together and do what they did during that strike, when they were trying to organize, they would write the pamphlets in some 8+ different languages in order to get the message across for the people to unite. The actual strike itself, internally into the several different plants in the Flint, Michigan strike, wasn't that great of a number. It was somewhere around the 700 to 1,000. But the more important part was the support outside, when there were thousands and thousands of people outside that supported the strike. One of the things, in my opinion, that we were successful to win the strike was the formation of the Women's Emergency Brigade. And these women were a force to be reckoned with, and they took on the police, they took on the National Guard, they took on anybody that got in the way to protect their fathers, their sons, their brothers, and their family members.
Wow. Was there a union in place before the sit-down strike, or did the sit-down strike give birth to the union? Can you talk about that?
Unions, the Flint sit-down strike was not the very first sit-down strike. There were many sit-down strikes. Some of the first ones were at Kelsey Wheel, where Kelsey Wheels back in that day were the rims on, as tires, rims that we know today, were spoked rims, much like a bicycle would be today. And a lot of Polish women worked in that plant because of their hands were so much smaller, they could lace the wheels a lot quicker. And they had their first original sit-down strike, I would think, and it only lasted a little while, but that was when the Ruther brothers were really getting a lot of traction. And so the union was formed, but nowhere near what it was formed after the 36 and 37 strike. After the 36, 37 strike, the UAW is really formed, and more importantly, the middle class was formed.
If you could repeat your statement about the union was formed after the strike, and if you could name it, and for those that don't know, although I assume most people in Flint would know what UAW stands for, but if you could say the words, okay, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, when the UAW was formed to its fullest, and it really took traction right after the 36 and 37 strike, the UAW, which is United Auto Workers, later on become United Auto Workers, Agricultural Implement Workers of America, as more sectors joined the UAW.
So the United Auto Workers was formed after the sit-down strike?
Well, the UAW was being formed, but as a institution where it took on a large number of members, and where they were able to get then later legislation so that you could openly talk about unions and you could form unions and without the fear of being fired for that activity. It really took hold. The 36 and 37 strike was really where it took off.
What would you say was the most important thing that came out of the sit-down strike for the United Auto Workers?
Was a voice at the table, an opportunity to sit across the employer and make reasonable requests and demands.
Can I interrupt you, please?
Yeah.
My voice will not be heard, so if you could say the most important thing that came out of the sit-down strike for the United Auto Workers was a voice at the table.
Okay. The most important thing to come out of the sit-down strike of 1936 and 37 was that the workers had a voice at the table. They were able to sit down at a bargaining table and collectively make demands and requests to help the work site, work the environment, and eventually help the company.
Fantastic. Have you personally participated in many strikes in your career?
Many more than I ever wanted to. Now this is, just you're taping, but there's no winner in a strike. Never, ever. You resolve issues, but there are issues that if it takes a strike to resolve them, you could have resolved them before. But let's get back on track. Yes, I have myself personally participated in a lot of strikes. Probably one of the biggest one would be the strike right here in Flint, Michigan of 1998 when the company was attempting to take dyes out of Flint Metal Center. And we ended up not reaching agreement, went out on a labor dispute, and which in turn affected other sites around here. I happened to be working at AC Sparkplug at the time. It affected us. We then went out on strike and henceforth shut down the whole country as far as General Motors goes.
This probably is an obvious point, but what's the importance of having united workers? What's the importance of labor unions?
It's the solidarity.
If you could start by saying the importance of, put it into context for me, that would be helpful.
The importance of labor unions is the solidarity for people to collectively have a voice. We do that not only in the industry of the United Auto Workers or the Teamsters or the AFSCME or any of the other locals. We actually start it when we're in school. We have our city councils, our class presidents, that when students have issues, hey, look, we think we need more water fountains. In the summer, we don't have any air conditioning. It gets hot in these buildings. The student council that they elect, they can go to the bargaining table with the school and say, hey, look, here's some things we think we need. So labor unions and unions as a whole are very important for the unity of people to get united and talk about things that are important, because we all have a lot more in common than we have differences.
That was so amazing. And I love what you said about it starts in school, because so many kids will see this exhibit and be inspired. That was fantastic. Can you talk a little bit about the United Auto Workers and how it was founded? Like, how did it coalesce after the sit-down strike?
Well, the UAW was really founded early on, and the Walter Reuther and his brothers really took hold of it. They had came over to the United States, become American citizens, and they knew that the workers deserved representation and deserved protection in the workforce from big corporation and corporation powers. They taught us, and then we learned that corporations profits have no patriotism. And in order to fight for that, you have to be organized and you have to be together, and we have to walk in solidarity, and we speak with the same voice, and we ask for to share in them things. We have a pretty simple philosophy, is that in this bay of water, as the corporation sits with their yacht and we sit with our dinghy, all we ask is when the tide rises, we rise with it. Because when the tide lowers, which it has in the past, we are right there as partners with them to take concessions or whatever we need to keep the work here and the people working.
That was a great visual of people's fortunes going up and down along with the heads of the companies. That's fantastic. I've been asked to give you bonus points if you have any stories about Francis Perkins.
Francis Perkins. Why do I? I'm drawing a blank on Francis Perkins.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Can you tell me, generally speaking, what does the auto industry mean for the people of Michigan and the history of Michigan? It's almost legendary. Like, what does it mean to you?
Well, before and right after the sit-down strike in 1937, I'll give you an example. In the city of Flint, you can drive around the city of Flint and you can look in neighborhoods in what I call cookie cutter houses, where a lot of houses look identically the same. Housing was such a problem, General Motors would bulldoze and contractors would bulldoze whole fields down and build houses for the people to come in here. Henceforth, where the word neighborhood come from, actually. And so the automobile industry, as it grew, as more and more vehicles became available and spread out across the United States, then that just triggered other businesses to follow along, whether it be people making the tires, whether it be people making the seats, whether it be people doing all the other business. And then it even goes farther. It goes farther into the communities where people are paying more taxes because there's more people, which means you have more fire department, you have more police, you have more utilities type of stuff. And then you go down to the corner store where there was never a grocery store before, now grocery stores were popping up. So the boom of America and the middle class really took off, and I believe it started right here in Flint, Michigan.
Because of the auto industry.
Because of the auto industry.
That final sentence was so fantastic, that the boom, the economic boom started in Flint, Michigan because of the auto industry. In your words, if you could give me that as a thought, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, the 1936 and 37 strike, at the end of that, started the boom in this country. It started the middle class. It started the growth of the little guy and the little gal. It paved the way for our children to go to college and have great educations in our school system. It opened the door and it paved the way for women's rights and civil rights. The United Auto Workers have been involved in every single social movement there has ever been in this country, and that's our belief that human rights are civil rights and civil rights are human rights.
That's fantastic. Why do you say that organizations like the United Auto Workers are tied to civil rights and women's rights? What do you mean?
The labor organization, especially UAW, is tied to civil rights and human rights because that's our DNA, that's our nature. Many of our members never ever need the assistance of a United Way or need the assistance of a food bank, but yet they give with their heart because they truly believe in giving back into the neighborhoods in which we work and live, because we are fortunate enough to negotiate good wages, good benefits, and we're also kind enough and wise enough to give and share what we have. And the civil rights is a huge part of that. It is shameful that if just because I don't look like somebody else, that I should be treated different than somebody else. Because I ask this question to people that they cannot answer this question. If you were born blind, what color would I be? Because you wouldn't know. You don't know the colors.
So in your mind, a union is an equalizer, is a unifier? What is it that a union does to take away these inequalities?
Well, the purpose of unions and what they really drive home in solidarity and unionism is the togetherness. We don't always agree. We won't always ever agree. But in a real life analogy, if there's 5 of us live on this street, we may not all get along, but all 5 of us know we have to go take our trash out to get it picked up. We all have everything. We have so much in common, and we get to talk about them type of things. The last few strikes that we've had, the last one here in 19, was I learned a lot about the strike, and I think people don't realize what we learned from that is that in a work site that has 5,000-6,000 people, that may have brothers and family members that don't see each other every day, but work together in different shifts or different departments. On the picket line, these people talked about common causes and common problems. People were talking about going fishing and hunting and having family outings that never talked before but worked just 100 feet from each other. And that has really helped us out inside our institution now, far as people being able to, let's have a good, open conversation and honest conversation.
Sounds like you're a lifelong union man.
Yep, I was fortunate enough to hire in when I was 18 years old.
So what is your, do you have optimism about the future of American labor union culture and, the corporate response to labor unions?
I have the utmost excitement in my heart about the future of organized labor, and more importantly, the relationship between organized labor and companies. The companies that realize that their members and their employees are their greatest resource are the ones that are the greatest success companies. And we drive that, we push that through. We have just examples after examples after examples. When we do launches now for new vehicles in the General Motors systems, it's our UAW members that are a major part of them launches. When we have health and safety problems or we have quality problems, it is our health and safety and our quality departments that are our members working alongside management to fix them problems so that our customers get the most highest quality, whether it be a service in our industry or it be building automotives.
That's great. In terms of this community, in terms of Flint, Michigan, how do you feel about the outlook for the future of the auto industry here, what the unions are bringing to the table? What is your basic outlook for the future of Flint?
I love Flint, Michigan. Although I never grew up in Flint, Michigan, I was one street away from Flint, Michigan, and I hung out in Flint, Michigan my whole young career as a high schooler. And I look back at Flint, Michigan, where they were, where they are, and where we're going. There was a huge presence of General Motors and other big companies in Flint, Michigan. That is not the case today. They're still there. But this city does not back down from a fight. They don't back down. We went through this water crisis. This city has come together. This county has come together. Some of the greatest athletes, some of the greatest people in our country have come out of Flint, Michigan, whether it be astronauts, whether it be poets, whether it be athletics. We have the only Major League Baseball player out of Flint, Michigan, one-handed, that pitched a no-hitter in American League Baseball, Jimmy Abbott.
So you feel, it sounds like you have a lot of love for this place. That's fantastic.
Let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
Recently, that's a national story about Flint, Michigan. With the racial turmoil in this country, with the Floyd incident, where there were marches and rallies and devastation to communities, right here in Flint, Michigan, when the members of this community wanted to do a march, our sheriff, Chris Swanson, came up to them, and they thought there was going to be a confrontation, and he asked them what did they want, and they said, walk with us. They put down their gear and they walked with them, because we are one strong community.
I actually read about that
Mm-hmm.
in the New York Times. That happened here.
Super, yeah, super. It dissolved a bad situation.
Because that's what it takes, right? It takes the position of authority to speak to the people, and this is kind of what your whole premise is.
People looked at that situation across the country. Police and civilians are clashing. They expected that. That's what we think is going to happen. Chris took the approach. We have more in common than we have differences. What do you want from us? March with us. Where are we going to go? laid down their stuff, shook hands, wrapped their arms around each other, and marched. They walked.
Can I ask you, you're the regional director of the UAW.
Region 1D, yes.
Yes. If you can tell me in a concise way, what does that mean, what you do? Tell me what you do and what does that mean?
So the region is made up of about 48,000 members, active members, and about 1,000. Excuse me. Let me back up. So Region 1D is made up of about 48,000 active members, and we represent everything from automobile build to part suppliers to aerospace to technical and office professional, whether they be schools, whether they be hospitals or higher ed. And across our region, we have 73 to 83 counties in Michigan, and we have about 85 different local unions and about 220 contracts that we negotiate. I'm the director, so I direct all of that. I have 13 servicing reps that go out and take care of the local unions, assist them in their needs, whether it be negotiation, whether it be health and safety issues, whether it be civil and human rights issues. And I have the honor and pleasure to be the elected person that gets to direct that, and love giving my support to all my members and our community.
Great. I see here that the region that you belong to manufactures America's best-selling trucks?
Yes.
You're like,
Yep.
what
In
is-
our in
what's
in our
about the distinction of your region?
Yep. In our region, we are the home of the Flint assembly plant, which assembles the heavy-duty crew cab pickup trucks. The only place in the world to build these trucks. And I will tell you this, I am so proud of our members, not only the ones that build the trucks on a daily basis, that refuse to let a bad part go forward because they believe in their customers, and all of the other supporting institutions around it, whether it be a Lear facility that builds plants, whether it be the metal stamping center that provides the metal. We build the best vehicle in the world, and to the point we can't build enough of them.
Going back to the sit-down strike for a second, would you say that that incident influenced labor unions all over the country? Was that some kind of turning point or some kind of like milestone in the world of organized labor?
Yes, the resolution of that event changed the world as labor unions go.
I love what you just said. If you could say the resolution of the United Auto Workers sit-down strike.
The resolution of the 36-37 strike between General Motors and UAW changed the world for labor unions as we knew it then. Labor unions started popping up. The labor unions started saying, if they can do it, we can do it. That was from the steel workers to the Teamsters to the miners to the farmers, and the list goes on and on and on. These brave men and women did not know what they were doing at the time. They thought they were taking on a big company just for their own working conditions, not that they were going to change the world.
That's amazing. Were there many women involved in the actual workforce at that time?
During the strike, majority of the women did not work internally in the factories. There were places that built seat covers. There were places that built like Kelsey Wheels that built wheels and that type of stuff. But the majority of them did not work inside the work sites. It was pretty much men. But when the strike happened and they sat down, the women really took over outside. They formed the Women's Emergency Brigade. They would bring food and water and stuff to the strikers. They took on the Flint Police, which were General Motors owned the Flint Police. At one time in what they called the Battles of the Bull's Run at it would have been Fisher Body Plant Number 2, the Flint Police had fired tear gas and live rounds into the building. The women had all of their long coats on, and in between their coats and their skirts were billy clubs. They went and smashed the windows out of the building so that they could get fresh air into their family members, and they marched down in a human line to stop the live bullets from flying into the plant. That's how brave them women were. That's why I say, if it wasn't for the women, we would not have won that strike.
Oh my God, you're just blowing my mind. The sit-down strike is a phrase that is known, but what was the sit-down strike? Because I'm just learning something new here. Did the workers actually stay in place? Did they not leave the building? What exactly, how did it manifest?
They were, the sit-downers were so very well organized that when they knew that if they left the plant, there would be other workers to come in to take their place, which would have to go through, endeavor the same problems they were having. So they knew the only way to win this strike was to sit down on the job. They asked management to leave. The management people that left. They boarded up the doors, welded the doors shut, took all the precautions, and they were so well organized that a piece that people don't talk about, that I love to talk about, is that internally inside the buildings, they all had committees. There were committees that worked on the machinery to keep them oiled and keep them going, so they had a nice working condition to come back into. There were people that were in control of the food. There were committees that controlled exercise programs so the workers could exercise. There were ones that were on sanitation, went around and cleaned the bathrooms, and they were extremely organized because they knew that sooner or later they would win this battle, and they still needed a home to go to work and make money for their families.
So while they were striking, they were actually improving some of their conditions on their own.
Yes, absolutely. It was amazing the committees that they put together and the things that they did. They were fixing things that management would refuse to fix. They put together people with the talent to go fix them. Said, hey, when we come back to work, at least it'll be fixed now. And it was pretty amazing what they did. And they meant business. They meant business. And after the Battle of Bull's Run, which was January 11th, ironically, it ended on February 11th. Shortly after that, General Motors, through the judge and through the mayor, tried to put injunctions on the workers to evict them. But we found out that the judge, which was Judge Black, had thousands of dollars in GM stock, so he ended up having to recluse himself. So we had a battle there. Governor Murphy was the elected governor, and the strike at one time seemed like it was failing because General Motors was still able to build vehicles because they still were able to build engines. So Chevrolet plant 4 was the engine plant, and General Motors had that guarded to the T. You couldn't get in and out of that plant. They had that guarded. They were still building engines. So the strikers developed a plan that a plant across the city that was not yet occupied by sit-downers, they put the word out through the snitches that they were going to, on a certain day at a certain time, go and take over that plant. Well, General Motors and the security bit on that rumor and left, and all went to that plant to secure that plant. In the meantime, the strikers had people hiding in the woods. They had them in people's garages. They had them hid all over around Plant 4. And when they seized the opportunity, they took over Plant 4, ceased operations, which soon after ended the strike.
This is an incredible story. Was there one mastermind that devised the strategy for this strike, or?
Walter Reuther was probably the one that had the different approaches and the different ideas. But it wasn't an uncommon theory. There was a lady from Chicago, her name was Lucy Gonzalez, one of my heroes. The Chicago police said that she was more dangerous than 1,000 rioters. And she believed the future would be that a traditional labor dispute would not work, that people would have to take a stand inside the work site. And as I said, the Chicago police deemed her more dangerous than 1,000 rioters, and Unfortunately, she died in a house fire at her own house, but they feared her so bad that they went in after her death and after the fire and seized all of her personal belongings because they still feared that woman. Lucy Gonzalez.
Is there anything that is related to the United Auto Workers or the sit-down strike or the auto industry that you haven't talked about that you think is important to know?
You know, history teaches us lessons. And what's not recorded or measured is soon forgotten. And this is one of them things that I really believe we got to talk more about, is our history and what this did to our country and our world. Right after the sit-down strike came World War II. And although women didn't work in the factories at that time, women were a key factor in World War II when they developed the recruiting program, which was called, Rosie the Riveter. So it's ironic to me that back in them days, when a woman's place wasn't really working in a factory, that was a culture that now the men that had that position now volunteered, many of them, to go fight for the freedom that we have today in World War II. The women stepped in to build producing of military equipment that we have never ever done in the history of this country until then. And so the women were building the equipment to give to the men to save our country and to save our freedom of speech. The reason I can sit here and talk to you today is because of them, and that's why I just what the women did for this country and continue to do this country is absolutely fantastic. And so the importance of this strike and what it is taking on after that is absolutely the backbone of the United States.
God, it makes me want to read up a lot about this.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Would you say that the story of the women, the Rosie the Riveter kind of thing, the women that stepped in to manufacture arms and equipment, did that mostly happen here in Flint?
Walter Reuther had went to General Motors and said that we had the capability of turning our factories into military manufacturings on a higher scale. They didn't believe it at first, but when they finally researched it and thought about it, they says, yes, we can do that. And to the point where right here in Flint, Michigan, Buick, at the Buick City Complex, they built a aluminum foundry to build the heads for the airplanes. Never had been mass produced before. And so it was huge for this community, but they did it all across General Motors. So when we talk the big three, auto, we talk about horsepower and the cars and all that good stuff. And that time in our history is an amazing piece of history because Americans, that we stand on their shoulder today, Americans, free, proud Americans, stood up and turned from horsepower to firepower to save our country, to save our freedom. And I just think that is something that we got to talk about. We got to teach our young kids. We got to teach them, if you don't know where you've been, you're not going to figure out where you're going.
Is Michigan the birthplace of the auto industry in this country?
Flint, Michigan is I consider it the birthplace of General Motors. Although General Motors was around the different parts of the country, they were the biggest corporation in the world at the time. But Flint, Michigan was pretty much the hub. And what's interesting piece about Flint, Michigan is we have the big they call it motor. I lost my train of thought. What do we call Flint? Do we call it? It's on the arches.
Vehicle City.
Vehicle City. So interesting part about Flint was people think that Flint is called Vehicle City because of the automotive, which it really isn't. Flint was the big time manufacturer of wagons, and particularly wagon wheels, right here down at the Durant building. And at the verge of when the lumber industry was almost going to go belly up, it was Flint, Michigan that kept them afloat because of the carriages. And if you go down Flint today, you'll see the big arches that say Vehicle City. Them arches were there long before the internal combustible engine, and to the point where you go back in history, you see where they had to widen the roads. They took all of them down, widened the roads, and built new ones when the automobile became part of history. And so it's an interesting thing about Flint. Flint's been around a long time. That's why I'm so proud of Flint and the residents of Flint.